you have an existence with somebody, that you have your imaginary bucket list, you know. One of our bucket list things was, at some point we would hope to be able to go visit, and we had our 5 countries that we were, you know, we wanted to sometime get to Ireland or South Africa or New Zealand or China, what have you. And we've both traveled the world, but there were certain places that I wanted to, again, encounter. Not visit. I wanted to encounter. And that isn't going to happen, you know. It just, you live for a while saying, well, I think it might happen, could happen, but at some point you have to turn and say, this is not going to happen. When I went through the divorce, that was also one of those encounters with the mystery of life. And without getting into any detail whatsoever, that divorce was so painful because, in one sense, there was no, quote, reason. There wasn't somebody else. There was nothing other than the fact that my life, wanted to go one way, and she did not want to be part of it. So I backed off and said, fine. Well, I'll stay here, we'll live in Shaker Heights, we'll raise the kid, you know, and so on and so forth. But by then the decision had already been made. And it was the wrong decision. There was no reason. There was no reason not to stay together. And it was such an emotional journey for me that at some point I thought I was going to lose my mind. I just, because things had to make sense to me, and this did not make any sense. So I spent a year trying to make all the adjustments that somehow would cause the reality that I wanted to happen. And I'll never forget the day that I went to a Guardians gathering in Chicago. And I walked at the end of it, into Joe's cubicle. And he was sitting there. And I'd seen him during the week, but I had not talked to the weekend, and I had not talked to him. And I stepped in, I was just about to drive off, and I just stepped in. And I stood there, and I looked at Joe, and Betty was there, and Mary Warren Moffat was there. And tears just started coming down my face. I couldn't speak. And I said, all I could say to Joe was, she's insisting on a divorce. And I just stood there. And Joe lights up one of his Salems. And he looks at me and he says, Gillis, one thing about Joe is he never called you by your, he's never called me by my first name. It was always Gillis. Gillis, he said, you need to know one thing. He said, if you've done everything you can to change the situation, then you gotta realize God knows what he's doing. For you and for her. And that was a transformative statement. And as I reflect on it, as I tell people, what happened was the pain did not go away. The pain was just as intense, but I could bear it. I could bear it. And that made all the difference. Before, I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear to face the reality. Now I could. And I still didn't want it to happen. I still wanted the life that I could have. And so that, for me, that was a releasing word